All right, we're on our way to presentations. Got a couple of good ones coming up today. So before we start presentations, just a few reminders. If you have plans to sit for the final exam, remember everybody has the possibility to opt out of the final exam, but if you want to sit for the final exam, please try to let me know before the end of this week. Okay. I've got some planning I need to do if that's the case, and I would like to know sooner rather than later. If that's not possible, if it's a last minute decision, please inform me that it'll be a last minute decision at the very end. But let me know if you're planning on sitting for the final exam. Also related to that, remember that you do need to take notes over these group presentations. Probably a paragraph or two will suffice for each group presentation, or maybe like 7 or 8 bullet points if you want to do it bullet points, whatever you want to do. Again, the goal of this is not make you do extra work, but to make you focus on the presentations and be aware of what's going on. And those can be submitted at the end of class on Friday. That presumably is the case. I did have a question in AIS. I will reflect the question if you're comfortable with writing your notes rather than typing them out. If you want to take a picture and submit those to Brightspace, that is perfectly fine. There's no need to actually write them down and then have to actually retype them out. I'm not looking for a particular form. I'm just looking for you to be attentive while your classmates are presenting. So real quick, for the second group who prepares just for Zoom notes, this thing I'm going to hide the recording bar, but probably when the first group who presents escapes out of it, it will pop back up. So make sure that you can hide this bar so it doesn't get in the way. You can just click on the ellipses up here and go to hide floating mini controls and they'll disappear. Okay. Which you'd think that I would have done that much earlier in the semester, but hey, we're all human. I've got Turner Technology Trends and Auditing up. Who would like to go first? To this group, or would you like to go to group one? Like to go first? You can go first. All right. Fortune favors the bold, I guess. Yeah.
The one. Yeah, I can focus, or we can pass this around. It doesn't matter. One of four.
Yeah, I can just go here. Then I'll switch.
Yeah, we can switch.
Okay, just
I take this.
or she just puts out the dog if you have not.
Okay.
All right. Our presentation today is over the current technology trends in auditing. And I'll be starting kind of going over the evolution and background of the history of auditing. Obviously, evolving from paper to the powerful technology that we have today with accounting systems, information systems, evolving from manually reviewing documents and recording transactions. Obviously, a large first step that started a lot of different trends, and then moving on to the late 20th century. Digital tools were being introduced, things like computer-assisted audit tools, which are software that can test large data sets more efficiently and with higher accuracy, a large step. And then moving into spreadsheets and accounting software. This is obviously a huge step that we use today, and we probably will use the rest of our life. Things like Excel, Google Sheets, and then along with really any accounting software are huge trends that have hugely impacted how we portray information and are able to relate to things. And then moving into the future, real-time audits and blockchain. We'll talk a little bit more about blockchain later in the presentation, but with real-time audits, this would be continuous auditing services, or auditing offers faster and more secure assurance. Obviously, just anytime the auditor can get more assurance, this is obviously a great thing. And then moving on to the timeline, as I was kind of talking about earlier, the start of computer auditing in the 1970s, 1980s was a huge thing. Moving from this paper and recording transactions to computer auditing provided more assurance, and we've obviously evolved from that. And then moving on to the 1990s, ERP systems, which would be enterprise resource planning systems. This is when the company is able to connect all departments into one single system. One example that we all know from AIS would be NetSuite. This is when the auditor is able to go into that system, look at where they're recording all the transactions, and basically anything they want to know is in that single system, and they're able to look through that. And then leading into 2001, the Enron collapse. This was grave financial fraud that lost the public trust. We've heard a lot of about this in class, and this leads directly to 2002, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. We all know Dr. Barnes loves talking about that, and it's very important. This mandated certain reforms in financial reporting and auditing for public companies. A lot of requirements were made here for the auditor, and a lot of guidelines to go by. And then moving on into 2010, the big data and big data analytics. We also talked a little bit about this in class with analytical procedures, being able to predict kind of the norms for different accounts and be able to go through big data with higher accuracy and more efficiently. And then moving into 2020, something I'm sure no one here is familiar with yet, AI. This is something that we all know today, and it's obviously going to be more prevalent in the future, just becoming more efficient. We'll talk about it later in the presentation, but just obviously saving time with whether that be in busy work or some things that just anything that can be more efficient, more accurate is something that's great for the auditor. And then specifically in 2020, COVID-19 made the auditor have to be able to work from home and learn the skill of remote auditing. And so that's something that they had to adapt to, and something that's become more prevalent today.
So we're going to be discussing 4 current trends that are impacting the technology field of auditing. The first 2, robotic process automation and blockchain, I'll be covering, and then Jacob will be doing data analytics and AI. Robotic process automation, or RPA, is using robots to do repetitive rules-based audit tasks. Things that would fall in this category would be account confirmations, or bank confirmations, account reconciliations, getting data from different records, and organizing work. There's 3 main benefits that RPA gives to auditors. The first one being the speed at which we're able to process data. Instead of doing a lot of busy work when you're on an audit engagement, you can have robots doing these things overnight so that the next morning on an engagement, auditors are well ahead of where they would have been 10 years ago. It also increases accuracy because we're able to avoid human errors on these mundane, repetitive tasks. And third, we're able to scale audits. Because there's so much data, so much more data than there was even 10 years ago, we do have the computing power with RPA to support that increase in data. So we're able to keep up with the data trend with our newfound computing power. Every Big 4 firm uses RPA. Halo, which is PwC software, and Clara, which is KPMG software, both have RPA integrated into their auditing systems. Next is blockchain. As we all know from AIS, that blockchain records transactions in blocks on a distributed ledger, and depending on what type of blockchain it is, it might be public, it might be private, but it's very secure because the individual transactions can't be tampered with, but they will be detected if they are tampered with. Because of this, we are able to reduce the need for traditional confirmations as auditors. Instead, we would be able to look on our client's blockchain, if they're using that to record transactions, and be able to verify certain things from there, as opposed to from third-party sources. The focus, instead of the accuracy of the confirmations, becomes the security of the blockchain, making sure that that is tamper-proof and able to be trusted by the auditors. PwC and Deloitte both have blockchain audit readiness services. This means that they're helping their clients establish internal controls to make sure that their blockchains are operating safely and effectively.
All right, and then moving on to data analytics. When you think of data analytics, you think of data higher quality audits, but also more efficient. So the first thing is real-time data for risk detection. So this allows for auditors to detect risk in real time. So that would be any like potential frauds or errors in the statements and not have to wait until the financial reporting period is over. Moving on to the full population analysis, we're placing sampling. That's just where instead of taking a subset of transactions and looking at that, now you with data analytics, you can review 100% of all the data, and then this just helps with any hidden anomalies or any errors that you might not get if you just do a portion of the sampling. With predictive models forecast, that's basically when you take the current and historical data, and then you would make a model that predicts where errors are most likely to occur. This just helps auditors focus on the areas where this model says that this is more going to be like high risk areas rather than smaller stuff. It is a predictive model though, so you can't 100% trust it. It won't always come true. With the dashboard providing visual audit insights, so that is where taking the audit data and you're creating charge graphs, any kind of visual aid, and then auditors can quickly just look at the graph, and then if there's any discrepancies or any anomalies, they can flag that, and then they can go back into the data and see where these issues are arising from, and if it is a serious error. And then finally, the automation streamline. Audit data processing, that's more of the data cleansing or the classification. This just helps reduce manual error when there's automation and allows for auditors to focus on more critical analysis. And then moving on to AI, I'm sure you have used AI, you've heard of it in pretty much all your classes. Specifically for audit, you have first the automated anomaly detection system. So this is where AI can scan large sets of data, and then they can look to see if there's any potential fraud going on or if there are any errors. And this just helps auditors look through this big set of data and get to see if there are any issues more quickly. With real-time transaction monitoring tools, this is where AI can continuously monitor transactions rather than just after the fact. So if there were any irregularities or something that wasn't caught when the transaction initially happened, AI can monitor it when it continuously while going through, and this just also helps make sure that each transaction is following the compliance rules set by whatever company. And then the predictive risk assessment models, this is kind of similar to the data analytics, what I mentioned for that. The only difference really is that you can put in the data into AI and it can give you a predictive model, kind of like how data analytics would. I wouldn't solely rely on this though, because AI is constantly still developing and constantly needs new audits or new data to make sure this is good. So you could do a comparison between a data analytics and a AI predictive model. Natural language processing audits, this is for more unstructured data. So think of like emails and contracts. This just helps with any like manual reading errors. And if you have like large sets of data or like a statement that's like 50, 100 pages long, you can input it in AI and it will be able to get you a summary of 1 or 2 pages with the most important points. And then AI drive compliance verification, that just makes sure that any transactions that a company does is works with the internal policies, any external laws, and any regulatory requirements that are in place.
All right, so now we're going to talk about future considerations. I'll cover data privacy and cybersecurity, and then I will talk about ethics and workforce changes. So for data privacy and cybersecurity, there's always third-party risks. A lot of these companies don't have the ability or the in-house resources to develop all of these systems for themselves. So they're at the mercy of the companies and their security. If something went wrong on these third-party websites, they need to be able to, have the resources to correct anything that might go wrong. Strict access control, again, segregation of duties, as Dr. Barnes likes to say, is very important. Making sure that there's enough people to handle all this data, all this technology, and not relying on a single person. If you relied on a single person, they might use the data for malicious purposes, or they just might not have the intelligence or knowledge to fully get all of the benefits out of these technologies. Data ownership is really important. As clients give all their data over to the audit company, it needs to be considered like if something went wrong with this data, is it the client's fault or is it the audit firm's fault? And how are we gonna approach these as we rely more and more on all of these AIs and new resources, and then data breaches, of course, making sure that you have proper security measures just to keep your data safe and protected. In terms of regulatory changes, progress will always grow faster than the laws can keep up with. I know that there's a lot of talk about laws regarding the use of ethical AI usage and where that line is drawn. So as companies integrate more and more, they need to make sure that as laws are being put out there, they're in compliance with these laws. International changes, Europe might not have the same thoughts towards governing data as the United States does. I know in Europe, they think that the data is mainly the customer, like the consumer's asset versus the United States. Once you hand it over, it's not really yours anymore. Training is also necessary. Just be able to keep up with regulatory changes, making sure that your employees know what's allowed with this data and what's allowed to use with this technology. And then again, who is accountable for mistakes should they happen?
Okay, now looking at ethics and professional skepticism within technology in the future. So as you've heard through the presentation, technology has made auditing a lot more efficient, but along with that, it can amplify the ethical risks along with that. So looking at that, you're going to be trusting your technology, but there needs to be levels of trust. As AI has been growing, it's not always going to be 100% right. So kind of understanding that there are going to be mistakes along the way and being able to have independent judgment and checking those answers along the audit. And then kind of having the mindset of not blaming the software 100%. You're still the one liable in most cases. So being able to understand that. And then black box algorithms, you need to be aware of those. Those are the algorithms that are non-transparent AI. So it's not going to show you the process of how it got there, or they're going to be very complex. So being able to, when you get an answer, knowing that it could have got a different way, you need to be aware of that. And then bias in algorithms, I was kind of surprised by this one, but a lot of AI is biased in the ways of risk, and it overlooks some of the risks that humans are aware of in different accounts and transactions. And that leads me to the final, that the human role of auditing is going to remain crucial in the future. I don't see technology overtaking it 90% or 100% in the future. And with auditing, making opinions is very important, and being able to kind of be able to tell the information in a way and giving the opinion of if a company is in the right. So that leads to the workforce changes, and auditing is going to stay, but the traditional auditor skill set is definitely going to have to evolve to the more technology sides. A lot of firms and companies are starting to hire different types of skill sets and career paths for their auditing. Computer scientists, cybersecurity, and statistics are getting big inside of auditing, and kind of being able to find those jobs and kind of make them into auditors, but also auditors kind of being able to understand the statistics and the cybersecurity and all that, and kind of merging the two to become more efficient and more safe. And with that, soft skills are going to be very crucial in being able to understand the data that you're getting from the AI and all that, and being able to explain it and communicate it to your customers and the firms that you're auditing. You're going to be able to think critically, and you're going to have to be very adaptable with the future, along with technology that we don't even know is going to be in the future. So with that, lifelong learning, being able to be a continuous learner in your job, and understanding that the laws are going to change throughout. So overall, in conclusion, we looked at the current trends of auditing with technology, with AI growing significantly, RPAs and a lot of the big fours, blockchain and data analytics, being able to take all the large amounts of data and get them into products, and then future considerations with the data privacy and cybersecurity, the regulatory changes, ethics, and being able to stay skepticism. and then the workforce changes in the future.
Ew.
So, quick question about something Joseph said. Um, is data an asset?
Yes, well, and I don't know by definition if it's an asset, but I feel like a lot of companies use it to create, better products for customers, and so they use it as an advantage, and it's not necessarily a liability to a lot of companies, so I would feel like it's more of an asset than it is a liability.
So we as auditors tend to be very, very protective of client data. But I'm curious if you think clients have the same perspective on data, like if a client gets a hold of my email address, does that belong to me or does that belong to them? Or is there a hazy line about what the ownership is?
I think overall, there's just a hazy line.
If that's the case, what boundaries constrain auditors from just basically saying, well, they got the email, it doesn't belong to them, so. We should be able to access those email lists too. Send Dr. Barnes a whole bunch of junk mail.
It might have to do with what what Joe mentioned of kind of the difference between cultures. Certain countries may deem that to be more acceptable of the data is the companies, not the customers. It may, flip in a different country, so that may be culturally dependent on how they do it.
Any questions? Seems like a good time to talk about stock reportings.
Do you want me to?
Time to talk about stock reporting.
Absolutely.
Like our work.
Maybe not everybody. Perfect, all right, it does. Go ahead.
So we're talking about SOC reporting. I'm Meg.
I'm actually from Deb.
I'm Reed.
I'm Jake.
And I'm Ben.
So what is a SOC report? So SOC basically stands for System and Organization Controls. It's an independent audit report issued by CPAs that assesses an organization's internal controls. It provides valuable information about infrastructure, controls, risks, and then the effectiveness of those controls within the entity. It verifies the controls in place that it can securely handle customer data. Each SOC report is personalized to the specific company, so no two will look the same.
Go ahead.
And then what controls can SOC reports cover? They can cover a lot of different controls, but we came up with like the 5 most relevant. So the first one is security. That measures to protect systems from unauthorized accesses, breaches, and cyber threats. The next one is availability, which ensures systems are reliable, operational, and accessible. The next one is confidentiality, which protects sensitive data from certain breaches or other disclosure. And then cybersecurity addresses the risks related to data protection, incident exposure, and security compliance. The last one is financial reporting, which is relevant to SOC 1 reports, which Jake will go into more detail eventually. But that deals with like financial transactions accuracy. So each SOC report should be able to answer like a bunch of different questions, but these are the key questions that are the most important. So does the organization have controls in place to protect data and financial processes? Basically, a SOC report evaluates whether an organization has implemented different procedures and policies that safeguard sensitive information and financial transactions. The next question is, are these controls designed effectively? You want to make sure that the controls are properly structured to mitigate risks, and you also want to make sure that the employees are able to understand these and adhere to them. And also that mechanisms are in place to monitor any type of threats that may come up. And then the last question is, can customers trust this company with their personal information? It serves as a trust signal for customers and stakeholders to indicate whether that the organization is committed to properly handling their data and securing it, so nothing bad happens.
So there, as far as types of SOC reporting, there are 3 types of SOC reports. Type 1 and type 2 are more important to understand conceptually because type 3 is kind of a subcategory of a SOC 2 report. But a SOC 1 report is over internal controls related to financial reporting, or ICOFR, as Dr. Barnes likes to refer to it. A SOC 2 report, a SOC 1 report is anything related to your financial statements and the controls that you have in place as an organization. A SOC 2 report, on the other hand, is more so involved with data security and privacy controls. So those are everything non-financial, and those typically use what's called the trust services criteria. There's 5 different criteria that are involved with auditing your internal controls for a SOC 2 report. Those 5 criteria are security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy. Now, while not every control is subject to all 5 criteria at the same time, it's kind of just subject to what the auditing entity believes is necessary for the firm that they're auditing. And a SOC 2 report is typically going to be a lot more broad, and depending on the organization can look a lot different because obviously certain organizations might not need certain data privacy controls that other organizations do have. Whereas a SOC 1 report is going to be a little bit more standard. A lot of the things that are supposed to occur in your financial statements are regulated, and a lot of companies are going to have the same style of controls in all of their financial statements. So, and then a SOC 3 report is just a public report on SOC 2 compliance. I'll go further into that on my next slide. Furthermore, each type of report can be classified as either a type 1 or type 2. So you would say this, like, for example, we are receiving a SOC 2 type 2 report. The difference is a type 1 report is the design of controls over a during a specific point in time, and a type 2 report is the design and operating effectiveness controls over a period of time. So to dive further into it, once again, for a SOC 1 report, the purpose and focus is financial controls. That can be account reconciliations, approvals of invoices, things like that. The key users are management, internal audit, and external audit. The level of detail is very high. Anything that can be included in the financial statements could be found in a SOC 1 report. And the level of access is limited. It is limited to anybody within the organization that's being audited or the auditing entity. As far as the SOC 2 report, like I said, it's more involved with data security and privacy controls. That can be firewalls, encryptions, all that 2-factor authentication, all those kinds of different controls. Once again, limited to people within the organization and the auditing entity, but a little bit more broad due to the fact that it depends on the organization. So that can involve management, shareholders, legal teams, IT. It's also very high level of detail. And finally, the SOC 3 report is just a summary of a SOC 2 type 2 report. Anyone can use that. Technically, all of us could look at a SOC 3 report and use that. It's for the general public, marketing and sales teams. Potential investors can look at, if that's what you want to base your investment off of, is how well they follow SOC 2 compliance. You can do that by looking at a SOC 3 report. And the level of detail is low, as it is just a summary. And yeah, like I said, the level of access is anybody. They're all public.
So I'm going to be going into the key components of a SOC report. So starting with management assertion, the management assertion is a signed declaration from the service organization's management. This confirms the accuracy and completeness of the system's description and the sustainability and effectiveness of the controls over a defined period. Then this statement represents the organization's commitment to integrity and accountability as it lays the foundation for the SOC report by establishing what the auditor is being asked to verify. It also signals the stakeholders that management stands behind the system's design and operation. And then next is auditor's report. So the independent service auditor's report is a key component that provides a third-party objective opinion about whether the controls described by management are sustainable and operating effectively. The auditor evaluates the evidence through rigorous procedures and determines whether the system meets the application trust service criteria. This report serves as an assurance mechanism for clients, regulators, and stakeholders who rely on the integrity and security of the organization's services. And then next is the system description. So this is a comprehensive narrative that outlines how the service organization delivers its services, including infrastructure, people, processes, and data flow. It also explains the boundaries of the system and the third parties and the relative control objectives. So this section enables readers to understand the full operational environment, giving context to the controls and making it possible to assess how risks are addressed within the system. And then next is criteria and control analysis. So this section presents a structured analysis of how the organization controls meet the AICPA's trust services criteria, which include security, availability, integrity, processing, confidentiality, and privacy. It includes a mapping between these criteria and the controls implemented by the organization. The goal is to demonstrate the organization's commitment to governance and risk management while providing transparency into how they maintain trust with users and business partners. And then the last one is tests and results of controls. So this section details the actual testing performed by the auditor to evaluate whether the controls were operating effectively over the review period. And then the auditor uses specific methods such as observation, inquiry, and reperformance to validate control performance. The results indicate whether controls worked as intended and any exceptions are clearly noted. And this helps the organization identify gaps and reinforce its control environment going forward.
Next, we'll be talking about the auditor's process in a SOC report. So the first phase of this is planning the actual engagement. The auditor needs to have a deep understanding of what the organization does and how the system helps support those services. And then they also need to be able to identify what type of SOC report they're going to be using, either if it's a SOC 1, a SOC 2, or a SOC 3, or if it's a type 1 or a type 2. And then they also need to identify control objectives for a SOC 1 or trust services criteria for a SOC 2. This will be, these are the benchmarks that the auditor will use to evaluate the organization's controls against. The next phase will be conducting the actual audit. The auditor will perform walkthroughs and interviews. For the walkthroughs, they'll follow the transaction process from start to finish and observe how controls are applied at each step of the system. And then for interviews, it's just a structured conversation with an employee who either performs control activities or oversees them. And then next they will test the design and operating effectiveness of controls. So if it's a good design, then then performing them will prevent and detect errors. And then if they're operating effectively, it means they're being followed consistently in everyday use. And then the evaluation of evidence, things like access logs, change in management records, incident response reports, and system configurations and exports from software are all used to support the findings from the interviews and walkthroughs, as well as the tests of operating effectiveness and the test of design. And then finally, the reporting phase, the auditor will prepare their opinion, whether it's an unqualified, qualified, or adverse opinion. They'll document exceptions. That's basically when a control fails to be used effectively or is not properly designed, and they'll make note of that as an exception. And then they will ensure the report includes all of the necessary information, like the system description, the management's assertion, and the test results.
All right, now let's talk about some of the benefits of SOC reports. But before we actually talk about the specific benefits of SOC reports, I wanted to talk about who benefits from SOC reports. So first off would be the service providers. Service providers are the main organization that utilize SOC reports. To them, SOC reports show that they're dedicated to security, reliability, and compliance, which can all be very great things in building relationships in the business world. User entities are also benefited from SOC reports. User entities are the main entities that rely on service providers for certain functions, an example being like a payroll processor or an organization that stores their data. And they can use SOC reports to look at any risks associated with outsourcing their work to that service provider. Additionally, auditors benefit from SOC reports. SOC reports give auditors a heavy understanding of the controls in place in an organization, which can later lead to reduced testing. Stakeholders also benefit from SOC reports. Stakeholders get a great understanding of the internal controls going on in their organization and the operations in the organization. And that gives them a great deal of confidence that the organization that they have stake in is being managed properly. And now the specific benefits of SOC reports. First off, they build trust and transparency. SOC reports include a very detailed evaluation of the control environment and the effectiveness of those controls. So there, that builds trust with clients and with other stakeholders. And on the transparency side of things, SOC reports are done by an independent auditor. So that third-party auditor coming in, and it gives them an extra layer of credibility to the findings and an extra layer of objectivity to those findings. SOC reports also help with risk mitigation. Organizations can use SOC reports to look at their weaknesses within their internal control environment, weaknesses such as data security, privacy, and confidentiality. And they can see these weaknesses through a SOC report, and with the detailed information about their controls, they can come up with remediation strategies, which therefore would reduce the errors in their control systems moving forward. And next, there would be SOC benefits regulatory compliance. To simply put it, having a SOC report means that a company is dedicated to following regulations and being compliant with industry standards. And lastly, SOC reports provide a competitive advantage. SOC reports show that an organization wants to differentiate themselves from another organization. They have a proactive mindset about security, reliability, and compliance. And these can all build great relationships with clients, with entities, and with stakeholders that they would like to.
The last thing we're gonna be taking a look at is future considerations for SOC 1 and SOC 2 reports. Regarding SOC 1 specifically, some things that they could be testing in the future. AI is becoming very prevalent in companies' financial processes, whether it be through revenue recognition or tracking accounts payable. Entities need to have controls in place to make sure that what AI is doing is both accurate and recorded in the right period. Regarding third-party services, an example would be a company using a third-party HR service to be in charge of like payroll. Right now, SOC 1 reports use the carve-out method, which is assuming that entities utilizing third parties do their due diligence and research to make sure that what they're doing is nothing wrong, but it's all insurance that auditors want and clients want go up in the future. The inclusive methods more likely to be used, so that's the auditor using the SOC 1 report to also test controls on the third-party service as well as the organization that they're testing already. And then an increased focus on control environment. As controls continue to be tested and become more effective, they're gonna be harder to go around, but people at the top of an entity got the ability to override controls. That's always gonna be a concern. So that's something that needs to continue to be focused on in the future. Again, some stuff that SOC 2 could test in the future. The main focus is the use of AI and machine learning in organizations, especially organizations that have developed their own AI, so big four firms. For example, that when it comes to bias, they had to obviously provide data to the new AI machine for it to learn. But as Isaac mentioned earlier, a lot of AI becomes biased due to the data presented to it being biased, so there needs to be controls over that. It's something that SOC 2 can test. When it comes to data privacy, there's also been concerns among lots of different AIs on if the data that it's received is being used in appropriate ways. So controls being in process or controls being in place here, the SOC 2 can test. And then for explainability, this goes back to black box algorithms that Isaac also talked about. If a company is using AI for something like predicting things such as determining a client's credit score, things like that. It's great that the AI can do it. It has the ability to do it, but is there reasoning behind what it's doing? So for all three of these things, the main concern is organizations having proper controls in place, and that's what SOC 2 would be testing in the future. And then the last thing, not as much as what it would be testing, but more different types of organizations besides service organizations. They can start utilizing SOC 2 reports. And tech startups is becoming a very standard business practices. A lot of investors are very concerned with how client data is used, especially whenever it comes to tech. So having these organizations utilize SOC 2 reports provides assurance to their clients and auditors that data is being used in the right way. And then some other industries that could be using SOC 2 reports in the future, real estate, media and entertainment. Real estate has a lot of personal information that's vital when it comes to like addresses and seller information, and then media and entertainment. Stuff like licensing agreement, both of these industries are dealing with a lot of sensitive data. So when it comes to assurance to clients that their data is being used correctly, utilizing SOC 2 reports can be vital. That's all we have.
Questions?
So can I go back to something Jack said? You had mentioned the difference between the inclusive versus carve-out methods. Can you just briefly explain that one more time?
Yeah, the carve-out method is if a company that's being audited is using a third-party service, they don't test any controls of the third-party service because they're assuming that the original organization is doing their due diligence and finding people who are trustworthy to do things for them. The inclusive method would be actually doing some tested controls for the third party for whatever it's being used for. So if it's doing payroll, doing some tested control on the payroll functions for the third party.
So something the first group mentioned that might be relevant in the future is the use of blockchains in organizations. So let's assume just within the next decade that blockchain arrangement with supply chain management becomes more popular. So companies start utilizing individual blockchains to manage their suppliers and their customers and so on and so forth. Do you think that would increase or decrease the need for SOC reporting?
I would say increase, because the furthermore that you automate a lot of these processes and get into like using these new technologies, the more potential areas there are for control deficiencies. And I think that obviously SOC reports cover all those controls. So I think that would increase the need for them and the need to make sure that as an organization, if you're willing to use all of those new technologies, that you are protected properly.
So now just speaking in general, let's just ignore the impact of blockchain. What do you think the future for SOC reporting holds? Do you think that it's going to become more prevalent or less prevalent?
For SOC 1, I would say less prevalent. Like there's been a lot less financial issues lately. Obviously in the early 2000s is something that was big, but that's kind of going away. But when it comes to SOC 2 and privacy concerns and the use of AI and just information in general, I think uses of those is going to go up.
Other questions? Good introduction to SOC reporting. You ready? You're gonna experience that in your everyday lives. All right, we're done for today. Finish up for presentations on Friday. See you then.
I was about to ask you about that. I think we probably met.